Okay. Good morning. It is May the 25th, 2020, and we're about to begin our regular council meeting. I'd like to remind everybody that all public meetings are live streamed and recorded. Any verbal or written information provided may be included in public documents as per the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, FOIP 41. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9 o'clock. The adoption of the agenda is next on our list. Looking for somebody to adopt the agenda. Councillor Lang, those in favor? That is carried. We now are looking at 3.1, the regular council meeting from May the 11th, those minutes. Any errors or omissions? If there's none, I'm looking for someone to adopt the meeting minutes. Deputy Reeve Vandermeer, those in favor? That is carried. That brings us to Agriculture and Community Services, 4.1, Community Declarations. Mr. Martinson.
Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
This morning we are here to discuss some requests for declarations for various community initiatives. We have a request for the Seniors Week, as well as Intergenerational Day and Parks and Recreation Month for June coming up. So, from time to time, we do receive these. Typically the purpose of the declarations or the requests are to are educational and awareness and meant to bring attention to worthy causes such as recreation parks and seniors and Intergenerational Day, though they don't typically, not necessarily, they could mean we do something operational or something, but not necessarily. They can just be a declaration. Generally, urban municipalities do these things. Maybe some rural municipalities, I definitely wouldn't say many or most. We have not done these in the past, and I believe some of the reasons for that is that they are numerous. There certainly can be a day or a week or a month, pretty much throughout the year. Sometimes they can overlap and cause issues, if we don't declare the right one or all the ones or whichever ones some interest may want. And certainly our residents and ratepayers or stakeholders, if you will, there may not be necessarily consensus agreement for that initiative or activity, so to speak. So I think, that's why we brought these to council. We probably haven't had a wholesome discussion about this topic, with this councillor certainly for a while. So we wanted to kind of lay out the positives or advantages or disadvantages of doing these things and allow council to kind of move forward. But, as I mentioned before, they don't necessarily mean we have to do anything or have budget or anything like that. We certainly could, in a different time, maybe we'd have a barbecue or something like that. But certainly that's not necessarily doable this year. But yeah, so I think that's kind of all the information we had to provide to council. Maybe turn it back to the Reeve. Thank you.
All right. As a bit of a background on this, Mayor Burke contacted me last week and asked if we would be interested in kind of joining forces with regard to Seniors Week and Intergenerational Day, specifically Seniors Week, recognizing that she was looking for us to do some sort of shared initiative to go to the seniors centers and do something with them. I believe last year she took them for on behalf of their council some ice cream, and that was done. COVID's created quite a bit of a challenge this year, so we're not sure what that initiative is. And I said I'd bring it back to our council for discussion on how we could possibly do that as a joint initiative. As far as other declarations, perhaps that's a conversation for how we could create some policy around it, so we would have a path forward in the future for the various declarations that we know happen over the course of a year. But in this one instance, I guess what I'm looking for at least is, would we be willing to recognize, I would say, Seniors Week, being June the 7th to the 13th for 2021, and endorse the declaration and advertise on our web and social media, and that we would support cost sharing on the initiative with the town. We recognize that we do have seniors that are county residents in these various facilities. We did have a conversation to get a little more clarity from the CAO for seniors housing, Vanessa Kidd, and she indicated they do have a number of initiatives, and we'll try to find something that isn't the same as what's already being done. Councillor Swanson.
I guess this question is for the members that are sit on FCSS. Was there any discussion, because the seniors housing coordinator is correct under that umbrella, was there any discussion as to any initiatives for that week?
Councillor Lang.
I don't recall a discussion.
Councillor Duncan.
Sorry, the seniors housing coordinator is not under FCSS. That's separate entity, right, for council, separate councillors that attend that. But yes, FCSS, typically we have a volunteers appreciation week is the route we go on that, working to appreciate the volunteers that support our seniors or support other not-for-profit organizations in the county and in the town and the village. But, nothing specific was discussed at FCSS for Seniors Week.
Okay. Councillor Lang.
I am in favor of this council doing something to promote Seniors Week. There's our demographics. We have an aging demographics in this county, and many of these seniors are those that have built this community. And so I am in favor of doing something in conjunction with the town and perhaps the village. As far as other declarations, I think that's going to be a deeper conversation, because I think every week when you listen to the news, it's a week dedicated to recognizing one group or another, and it can go on and on and on. And I think we would be opening up a can of worms if we recognize some, but we don't recognize others. And it could add a lot of confusion and hard feelings.
Other thoughts or comments? I know that, as you indicated, Councillor Lang, that is a more complex conversation, and perhaps it's a policy that we have to think about so that we can, I think, move more smoothly through some of these decisions in the future. So that might be a workshop discussion and policy creation in the future with regard to the multiple declarations that we could be asked to do. In the meantime, other thoughts on supporting Seniors Week for this year? Councillor Duncan?
I would be fine to support Seniors Week in conjunction with the town and or the village. So.
Okay. Deputy Reeve Vandermeer?
I would also support the suggestion that we recognize Seniors Week in conjunction with the town. And in fact, I'm prepared to make a motion to that effect.
Okay, Councillor Hoven.
I'm against any type of declaration. You know, it's a nice little feel-good thing, but it's gonna be a situation where, you know, 10% of our council meetings are debating what are we going to declare this week and this month to be. And I just don't think that the residents of Clearwater County get a lot of benefit out of having us debate that and then spend money to update the website and show a bunch of different stuff. I believe this council is for building infrastructure and roads and providing services to residents, not making virtue signaling declarations to make people feel good. I think it's just gonna be, like Councillor Lang said, a can of worms. We're gonna declare Dog Week and have the cat owners mad, and then we're gonna declare Cat Week and have the dog owners mad. It's just, I think it's a waste of our resources, so I will be voting against this.
All right, perhaps the motion should be reading that we recognize that week as Seniors Week, and maybe we don't do the declaration portion of it, and what we can support in the initiatives for Senior Week with the village and the town. Would that be more palatable, Councillor Hoven?
I'd like to see the words first.
I understand. Deputy Vandermeer, you were considering a motion?
Yes, the amendments you were suggesting, Reeve, are acceptable to me. My motion is relative to Seniors Week and recognizing it, and doing so in collaboration with the town and perhaps the village of Caroline. It does not go beyond that to recognize other, or make other declarations ongoing through the year. This is a one-off in recognition of comments made by Councillor Lang that we do have a significant demographic within our community, and it is increasing, so that I think it's worthy of recognition in this case.
Councillor Lang.
This question is for Matt. Matt, as the Reeve had indicated, the town, I believe, bought ice cream for the seniors in the lodges last week. Do you anticipate anything larger than that? I'm just kind of trying to get an idea of the cost. So ice cream would be a nominal amount.
That would be our understanding. Yeah, you know, I think from my understanding is that would likely be they would maybe do something similar to that, obviously COVID notwithstanding. So if you can't disperse ice cream, maybe it's another small token of appreciation. I guess that would be the best way I could describe my understanding, is some sort of small token of appreciation on behalf of the local governance, or the town and county and village where we partner in Caroline. That was my understanding of it, yeah.
All right, thank you for that. Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. Last week I did have some email conversations with the executive director of Westview Lodge. I know that they are also planning an indoor picnic one day, and they're looking to buy some watermelon and so forth. So I did ask roughly what the cost estimates would be, and I don't expect it to exceed $100. So I think there is an opportunity there administratively. We could support that with a contribution on behalf of the county to help purchase those supplies. As well, we will also be reaching out to the other facilities in the region that provide services to seniors, and seeing if there's something that we can do similarly with them as well.
All right. So thank you for that clarity, and thank you for the footwork on being prepared for this, this question this morning. So the motion, I guess, would be to recognize June 7th to 13th, 2021 as Seniors Week, and endorse collaboration with the town and the village in an initiative, and it would come with the support funding for cost sharing. I hope that that kind of encapsulates the motion that I anticipate Deputy Reeve Vandermeer is formulating. I'm hoping you were able to capture all of that, Alana. Yay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? Those opposed? That is 6-1, it is carried. Thank you for bringing that forward. I appreciate the efforts. That brings us to 5.1, Rocky Mountain House Airport Terminal Needs Assessment. Mr. Magnus.
Well, I think that's.
Mr. Hagan then.
Thank you, Reeve. As council is aware, being a 50-50 partner in the ownership of the local airport, there's been discussion going on for quite some time as to the need for a new terminal building. And some different options have been looked at. Some community input has been gathered and so forth. Town of Rocky Mountain House, as evidenced by the attachment to the agenda item, the letter that they sent to council here at Clearwater, in terms of looking for some more time, more information to explore those different options for terminal building replacement. And so accordingly, per their letter, they're requesting Clearwater Council's support of their resolution. And again, their resolution is that further research be conducted for the needs of the airport terminal building, including airport statistics and usage of the building prior to selecting a design. So before you today is the letter from the town as well as some background information with respect to options for a terminal building and consideration for this council as to whether it supports deferring that decision until more information can be gathered.
All right. Councillor Hoven and I sit on that committee. Perhaps Councillor Hoven, I see your lights on. Perhaps you could provide some additional insight and I will chime in where possible.
Well, for me, when I was preparing for this agenda item, the one thought that came to me is, what do we want the airport to be in this community? And we can look at the usage in the past and build a building for the past, or we can have a vision and a plan and say, this is what we want the airport to be in 20 years, and we can build the terminal building for that. So on the one hand, I'm against having a study to look at past usage, but I am totally in favor of having the discussion of what does this community want the airport facility to be? Because if no one wants an airport, we shouldn't put any money into it. But if people want the airport to be a hub of aerobatics, of tourism, and an air show perhaps, we need to build for what we want. So I will vote in favor of this, that we support the town of Rocky Mountain House. But it has to be, what do we want for the future, not what do we need to do what we did in the past.
So part of the discussion that I recall having at that particular meeting, I guess it was about a month ago, with the Airport Commission, was looking at the needs assessment in a future forward. I recognize that, we should understand what the statistics might have been in the, historically, but I agree with Councillor Hoven. I think we need to understand the future vision. We do have a document that looks at that as being a growth opportunity. For many, it is the first glimpse that folks get who fly into our community and visit us. That is their first impression of who we are and what we envision for our community. So I think that a large portion of this particular assessment needs to take into consideration that future understanding, future forward, things such as flying schools, this aerobatics community, how that intertwines with the current use of folks who are coming in for the various uses, including air shows, that sort of thing. So I think that we need to also understand how we are asking the questions and what kind of questions that we're asking that are future forward as well. So again, I'm definitely in support of this. It was a recommendation that I know that we made, that we better understand. I guess I keep looking at this terminal building being 1,800 square feet, and that is only on one floor. And we understand that if you double that, recognizing there's a basement, you know, some of that limiting factor is only considering one floor when we have been told numerous times that both areas, the basement and upstairs, are being utilized. So that's part of the discussion, I believe, as well as what's future utilization of that terminal building look like. Councillor Lang.
So I'm looking at the motion by Randy Brown, and based on what I'm hearing from Councillor Hoven and Reeve Liard, I'm just wondering if this council would feel comfortable passing the same motion, only in front of the word usage, put future usage. So I'll read what my thoughts are. Be it resolved that council recommend to the Town of Rocky Mountain House that future research is conducted for the needs of the airport terminal building, including airport statistics and future usage of the building prior to selecting a design. I'm just throwing that out there.
I think that that's an appropriate amendment, that we could certainly see that as future forward looking. Other comments? Councillor Duncan.
I think it is correct to look at possible future usage, but we do have to consider, you know, past and present as well. You know, we know that because of the condition of the basement, that it hasn't been fully utilized in the last number of years. And you are certainly correct that there are currently 3,600 square feet sitting there, but it's not all being utilized. So I would support this as well, but look at all bringing the statistics in for all the usages and possible uses in the future.
Other thoughts or comments? So, Councillor Lang, with that motion and that slight amendment, is that your motion then?
So the amendment I put in to put future in front of usage.
Yes.
And I believe, and I'll just clarify with Councillor Duncan, when it says airport statistics, I believe that would encapture the past, my thoughts.
Councillor
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes, possibly. Maybe just to make it absolutely clear, we could say airport usage statistics or airport, I don't know.
Okay.
There's a lot of statistics there, right?
Okay.
There's flights coming in, there's usage by, you know, the forestry bunkers or the firefighting equipment and setup that's there. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by airport statistics even then, so maybe we can clarify what that is, just to make clear where we are on that.
Okay, so I'm going to make an
Councillor Lang.
amendment to my motion. So I'm going to say, be it resolved that Clearwater County Council recommend to the Town of Rocky Mountain House that future research is conducted for the needs of the airport terminal, including airport statistics and past and future usage of the building prior to selecting a design.
I think that certainly covers it all. Any other questions or comments? If there's none, that is a motion by Councillor Lang. Those in favor? That is carried 7-0. Mr. Hagan, did we get any indication of kind of timelines around this?
No, Reeve, we didn't, just what's in the letter.
Okay. Perhaps when we send our letter, perhaps we can ask the question about timelines and I guess process as we, notification of process as we move forward, so we better understand how this is gonna work and how the questions will be formulated, that sort of thing. Councillor Lang?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Any other questions with regard to the airport? Seeing none, thank you. That brings us to various reports. 6.1, CAO report. Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Reeve Laird. First item on the CAO report for this meeting is with respect to the May 14th Municipal Development Plan Steering Committee meeting. And as council is aware, because that committee includes all of the council members, there was a workshop or committee meeting to discuss potential process options to move the MDP review forward. And those options are listed as follows: in-person consultations, potentially 2 meeting rounds, different months could be held, each meeting to have limited capacity due to the COVID-19 restrictions. Again, the meetings will have 15 attendees, small project team to leave space for attendees. Council members would also be in attendance. Looking at multiple sessions, could be held on one day at each location, maybe a morning session, afternoon or evening session. Pre-registration for these meetings and a draft presented earlier in the year is the document to be discussed. So there'll be no other changes being proposed other than what has been shared with the public to date. But what this would present is an opportunity for those who didn't have an opportunity to participate in the past open houses and consultations to now have that opportunity. And as well, there'd be other forms of public participation still available: website, emails, phone calls, and written submissions. So this is really an attempt to, as much as we can accommodate under the COVID restrictions, to have as close as we can to in-person consultation and public consultations and allow more public input on the subject. The objective is not to necessarily come to a conclusion prior to the election, but rather gain as much information leading up to that as we can. And I would anticipate that the process will continue beyond the fall election.
Any questions or comments with regard to the Municipal Development Plan Steering Committee notes? Okay. I will note that while we're looking for additional input, and it is indicated here that no new changes are being introduced to the document at this time. That doesn't mean that we didn't hear the various recommendations and suggestions and inputs we got from the community. It means we're simply gathering more information from those we haven't been able to reach out to or contact from and we're hoping that the in-person meetings will allow for that to happen now. COVID hopefully will ease enough for us to achieve this goal. I see we have a point number 2.
Thank you. So point number 2 is an update on the real estate market within the region, including town of Rocky Mountain House and Clearwater County in the village of Caroline. And the news is positive, as noted in the report item. Some of the drivers of that increase are the ability for people to work remotely, which has come out of the COVID situation, as well an aging population that is looking to get out of the large urban centers and have a quieter place to live in their retirement years. In particular, acreages are moving very fast. The other impact that's having on this is the cost of building new construction is driving demand towards existing houses that are on the market and so forth. And there's some additional information provided there on behalf of our Economic Development Officer as well as his counterpart at the Town of Rocky Mountain House. So I think there is some positive news there going forward. And that is all of the CAO report.
Any questions with regard to Mr. Pratt's findings? Councillor Lang?
I'm just looking at the, excuse me, the two most common real estate agencies, the questions are hearing, and it's interesting about the internet, which we heard that years ago, that buyers are looking for the internet service. And also it's interesting about putting a second home on the property, and that would be, you know, mainly acreages, it sounds like that people are looking at, and that is not something that we have discussed in our MDP review, I don't believe. Like right now, second homes are allowed on farm parcels over 80 acres, but second homes are only allowed if it's for compassionate care. So that might be something this council might want to consider as well, if that's one of the main questions that people are looking at in order to move to our county.
All right. It's an interesting observations that we're getting back from our real estate folks. Councillor Swanson?
Yes, I know it's in the correspondence coming up, but the Sector 21 concerns in 7.2 in our upcoming, they make good comments in regards to this particular item, in my opinion.
All right, well, we'll be sure to look at that as part of correspondence when we get to 7.2. We'll have a better look at that as well. Other questions or comments? I actually have one reverting back to the MDP. I apologize for not thinking of it quicker. I see it's in the notice on my margin. How are we going to be notifying and advertising to our residents so that they're aware that these meetings, in-person meetings, are upcoming? Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve. I would anticipate that we'll use all methods available to us, via our website, social media, newsletter, updates as well. So we'll be exploring every opportunity to get that news out there.
I would think that most of the folks who don't use social media at least read the newspaper. All right, that sounds great, thank you. If there's no other questions about the CAO report, then we'll move on to the Public Works report, 6.2. It's quite comprehensive, so the easiest way is for our Public Works folks are here, so they're here to receive questions or comments rather than go through it line by line. Councillor Duncan.
Just with the Greater Beat 506 tender, typically we receive a number of bids on these. I'm just curious as to why we may have only gotten one bid on this one, if it's a particularly difficult route or...
Yeah, you're absolutely correct there, Councillor Duncan. This is actually my time here, first time I've ever only seen one bid being submitted. What we found in the past too is the operators of previous bids now are heading into retirement, and I think they've just decided and have taken it upon themselves to no longer bid on these beats. That's a sort of suspicion there, speculation there. Could be just in terms of the current workload in regards to other organizations and so on. But beyond that, we can only speculate as to why it was just the one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions or comments with regard to the Public Works report? Councillor Hoven.
With the Nordegg Heritage Center, item number 9, my first question is, when was that building originally constructed? And how old is it? And is that just wood shavings, this installation?
To answer the second question first, yes, it is wood shavings for insulation. I'm not 100% sure of the construction date. When we set out with this maintenance repair earlier this year, basically this, you can see the evidence of some of the rot that we found. We're really hopeful that it's not extensive throughout, but the wood shaving insulation is, you know, we're anticipating that's probably throughout, and we're looking at different options to possibly remove that and do a spray foam, so we don't have to you'd only have to remove the rotten timbers for now, and then actually, you know, cut windows in to get the wood insulation out, and then backfill with spray foam. So we're coming up with options there, and that would also, of course, we'd have to remove the entire stucco exterior and hopefully come up with a long-term solution, because this problem is only going to continue to get worse if we try to just do spot repairs right now. Of course, we know that a long-term insulating solution will reduce our operating costs, et cetera. So we're hoping as early as this week we'll have some proposals back there to try to rectify this.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments with regard to the Public Works report? Mr. Magnus, I do notice that as of late last week, we had 6,300 solid waste disposal access cards. They've been issued, and 10 non-regional cards that would be purchased. That's for outside of our area or contractors? Would you mind clarifying that? I just can't recall.
Sure. So the non-regional is outside of our county.
Okay.
So it could be, potentially residents that utilize our bordering transfer stations. So Cramond would be an example one. So typically residents from Mountain View County. And then the 8 regional would be potentially residents from Caroline or a town of Rocky Mountain House or Burnstick Lake Village Burnstick Lake, along with any of our First Nation residents as well.
Thank you for that clarification. And it looks like we have a 97 or 95% of our utilized folks utilizing our temporary central station seem to be happy with it. And so thank you for providing that information. Councillor Lang.
So Kurt, I'm just wondering, the 5% that aren't happy, what are the comments you're hearing?
I think just accessibility in terms of it's not as convenient as it was originally being in town. But the messaging we got out of that as well was, of that 5%, was they did not realize that we had the ability to accept recyclables at most of our transfer stations. So they understood the Rocky Transfer Station as being the only facility available to accept recyclables until such time that was made aware to our residents. Was an educational component more so. And once that messaging got out, then the concerns dropped off when they came to the realization that potential transfer station site that was closer to their resident had the ability to accept recyclables. That made them happy.
Okay. Councillor Duncan.
What would be the approximate number of cards that we would have to issue to cover most of the residents of the county?
It would be close to 10,000 cards.
Okay, thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions, looks like you're off the hook. That's great. Thank you again for coming in, and that's very thorough. I do note on here on point number 13, the Highway 11 Twinning Functional Planning Study, that you've provided some information. Perhaps before we let you go, if you could give us a brief overview, I think mostly because it's good information for our community to hear.
Yeah, so we're, Clearwater County Public Works has been requested to be basically a supporting agency to the provincial plan. Most of the current work or most of the work that's going to be done within the next couple of years, for actual construction work, tend to be toward the east end, between Sylvan Lake, the Sylvan Lake turnoffs maybe to Bentley. As you can see, this section here, the study area is from Highway 22 to Bentley. And the study is not even going to be completed until the end of next year. So we're here as just as a supporting agency to help provide any development plans through our planning department, as well as provide any updated information for landowners. We're also going to provide any existing traffic count data from all of our intersecting range roads that go up to Highway 11 to provide them any background information for proper intersection solutions for each one of those. So yeah, we are looking forward to working with the province there to provide as much data as we can as a supporting agency. And hopefully at the end of November 2022, they have a report that will come up with a solution. And I believe it's this summer, there's gonna start actually engaging landowners, starting to, see what kind of receptivity there would be for land purchase, because that is gonna be the biggest challenge outside of the cost, of course, is actually acquiring the land for the additional twinning.
And thank you for that update, and just thought before we let you go, good to have that highlight. Councillor Lougheed.
Yeah, and just to that same, I noticed one of the bullet points is describing a freeway facility and an expressway facility. Would you be able to tell me what the difference on those is, or just?
I apologize that I
background
can't. No, I honestly, this is word from word from the document that they provided. But I will certainly get back to you on what their definitions of that might be.
That is curious. Supplemental?
Just supplemental. A lot of the concerns I'm hearing from residents, of course, is the scope of the project and how much it might interfere with their adjacent property to the existing highway. So getting an understanding of perhaps access roads or highway access intersection treatments would be nice to have a background information to be able to convey that to the residents.
All right, Mr. Hanson, you look eager to answer.
The only thing I guess I can contribute to that was that as they go through this study, any additional information, preliminary planning or ideas, they start to, because there's lots of different solutions that they can come with a twinning scenario. There's, of course, you see between Sylvan Lake and Red Deer, it's a huge meridian. You look at the amount of real estate that would take in order to cut a swath like that all the way from Sylvan to Rocky Mountain House. That would be a huge impact. But perhaps where they have the room, they would like to have that type of design. But there's other methods to still accommodate or still create a 4-lane twinned highway solution. So I imagine in areas that we know that on that drive we can see that there's residents' houses there right up against the boundary on both sides. So, there's could be even a possible realignment of the entire highway in order to get around. So absolutely, whenever any new information comes or anything that I can provide for a much more detailed look at what they're doing, we'll be happy to provide that.
Right. Thank you for that. And I know it was one last thing before we let you go, but this is something that's exciting for our community. It signals opportunity. It signals, always with opportunity comes challenges. But this is good news for our community in many ways. Deputy Reeve Vandermeer.
I think just to clarify for those who may be watching this and interested, when you look at the map, it is very clear that this twinning goes as far as Highway 22. It does not go into or around Rocky Mountain House at this time. Any comments on that, just to be specific in that regard?
I was to the understanding, actually, the last investigation area was actually supposed to come right into Rocky Mountain House, and there again, that's something I can come back with more information on. If that's on it, maybe that might be the different study timeline, but I'd be happy to bring that back in to make sure that we have everything covered to see what's in the study area.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to 6.3. Thank you again for giving us a very comprehensive report and walking us through it.
All right, I said FD 4 times on all programs. Nobody even corrected me.
I heard it, but I thought, just let it go. We know what you meant.
Sorry about that. Heard it Tuesday morning.
It's like a Monday. Okay, that brings us to 6.3, Broadband Project Report. Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. In addition to the items that are noted in the project update, the workshop that's referred to for May 21st did indeed occur. Council was present for that. I think it was a worthwhile discussion and a sharing of the feedback from internet service providers that was conducted on the county's behalf by our consultant. So I think it was a good session for information sharing, and we'll provide information for decisions going forward. As well, another item in addition to the report is the point of presence that we are creating over on the emergency services property just down the road, and we're anticipating construction over the summer and anticipate as well that that facility will be operational by September or October.
Okay, any questions or comments? Everything's still fresh from Friday when we had our workshops, so I think we're still adjusting and absorbing that information. If there's no questions or comments on that, then we will look to 6.4, the Fire Chief Report. Mr. Hagan.
I don't have any specific information to add to the report, Reeve, but I did just want to identify for council's benefit and for our viewers that my understanding is that this report went out on a monthly basis to council, and we just thought it made sense to include it within the report section here. So obviously the fire chief isn't here to speak to the report. If there's any questions, I can explore those on council's behalf and get back to council on it. But again, we just thought that this was an appropriate place for the report to appear and be easily consulted by anybody in the public that was interested in the information.
Any questions or comments with regard to the Fire Chief's report? Councillor Lang.
I'm just wondering about this drone mapping inventory. I'm hearing a few complaints from the Farrier area where there's a higher density. Is there any people are concerned with their privacy, and there's even you go on social media, there's quite a few negative comments. Is the fire department reaching out to the communities or to give people heads up that this is what they're doing? Because the residents don't know that it's, the fire department.
Mr. Hagan.
Yeah, thank you for that point, Councillor Lang. I haven't heard any specific concerns myself, but I will have a chat with the fire chief about that issue. and make sure that we are communicating with the public and letting them know when we're conducting these exercises and what the purpose is.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I guess for me, I noticed that some of these missions are on behalf of Ag Services for new mapping of Cowboy Trail or whatever, and perhaps that's what this is about, I'm not sure. How does that work when we're having fire department members manage their time when they're working for another department? How does that work? Like, do they transfer time for time? Is there some sort of trade? How do we keep track of that on paper?
I would suggest that it hasn't been significant enough to warrant the added work to try and track that. Rather, it's more a reflection of the team atmosphere within the county administration to work together and share knowledge going forward.
All right. One of the other questions that I have been asked is with regard to the training tower as it's being built, will local contractors be utilized for this project? And if so, what portions of the project?
And I don't have a specific answer for that. I will follow up with the fire chief and with Public Works. But again, depending on the dollar value, we may have to go to tender on these. So I think that's what it would all come down to, is the legal requirements that the county is under. So I will do some follow-up and ask for that information to be brought back to council.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Lang?
Murray, both a question and a suggestion. So if it goes to tender, usually tenders go out if it's above, I have 75,000 in my mind. Am I correct?
It's typically 75,000 for goods and services, but construction is significantly higher than that.
Okay. And just a thought, if we're getting questions about local contractors, maybe portions of this project would be well under 75,000, but is there any harm in going out for tender even under 75,000? Just see who's out there.
Absolutely no harm in doing that. But again, that throws that net a little wider. So it could work to a disadvantage of local contractors if we were to do that.
Okay. It's good to understand that. And I guess last but not least, I noticed that we've got some apparatus changing out and some went to auction. Where does that show up on accounts receivable for, how did we do at auction?
We would have to bring that back as additional information. I would suggest probably through a Public Works report, since our fleet manager oversees that. So I'll follow up with Mr. Magnus and ask him to include comments on that success.
Yes, well, that'd be very interesting and it is just more a point of interest for me anyway. Any other questions with regard to the fire chief's report? If not, we'll move on to councillor reports. I'm going to start with Councillor Duncan.
I don't have anything to report on this term.
Okay. Councillor Lougheed.
Yes, just very briefly, the Parkland Regional Library Board met virtually on May the 20th. We were presented with the audit by Myers Norris Penny, and can report that there was no substantial misrepresentation of the facts there, and it was approved by the board. Definitely, I think there has been some changes in that the requisition will be using the Alberta Treasury Board population statistics now, because the old municipal affairs population statistics will be discontinued, so there might be some adjustment on population numbers and ultimately the requisition. And they also highlighted that the return on investment dollar for dollar is about 10 to 1, so there's good value within supporting the Parkland Regional Library System. And also on a meeting that was held over Nordegg a few weeks past, I think Councillor Lang attended that one as well. the impression I got from that meeting was that Nordig was kind of a unique situation within the Parkland Regional Library System. However, with a question I asked, there are 4 similar communities to Nordig that are still under the Parkland Regional umbrella, so I think that they still have the opportunity to support Nordig in a traditional way moving forward. So I think that's that's all I have to say for this time. Thank you.
Very well, thank you. Deputy Reeve Vandermeer.
The only thing significant to report are a number of meetings I had related to CAPE and the Connections Corridor. That's just an ongoing activity. Nothing else to report.
Councillor Lang.
No, I don't have anything to report today.
Councillor Hoven.
No additional things to report.
We're going quick. Councillor Swanson.
I forwarded to you in an email my report from the 2 days of the Economic Developers of Alberta Development Leaders Summit and Conference last week. It was 2 days. Very well orchestrated. The first day was because of COVID, they had pre-recorded their speakers and then brought together plenary panels the next day, which was also very good. It was interesting that after the first day there, we got to listen to Aaron O'Toole speak for about a half an hour. They had put out the request to all the federal leaders, and he was the only one to respond and the only one to speak. So that was very good. Key takeaways listed there, but the biggest thing that every company is a digital company now going forward because of COVID. There'll be some aspect of needing connectivity, and that was interesting to talk about the workforce, that workforce skills are critical in that digital realm, but that capital is more movable than people to attract businesses. So anyways, when I get the links to that conference, I will forward them to you all. And yes, it was a long day. I was glad I was at home and I could do a little bit of multitasking for the 10-minute breaks that we had in between. So it was very good. Thank you.
Any questions with regard to Michelle's, Councillor Swanson's report? Councillor Duncan.
We've often listened to Todd Hirsch in the past. ATV's been around a long time. I'm just wondering about one of his comments about we can grow the economy by lowering taxes. Did he say anything about how much or what type of taxes that would be?
He was actually saying that is the wrong mentality of lowering taxes. Oh. Alberta is already a lowest in corporate taxes in this country, and that we should not be looking at that. We should unlearn that lowering taxes will drive business. He gave a good example in regards to the film industry and how that is picking up, and then the agriculture as well. So.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, for me, I attended the Alberta Fire Chiefs Association conference virtually for 1 day. In between the circle of death while it was trying to connect to the broadband. They focus mostly on workplace stress management with COVID these days and the cost of compassion and what kind of a toll it's taking on all first responders right now. I also attended the senior housing meeting that was with Councillor Lang. And with regard to the building envelope, we are looking to do the request for proposal and then see where we go with costs associated with potential increasing lumber costs and if we need to defer some of that project. So we'll see how that information comes forward. And I also attended the fire sub-council meeting, again virtually. And one of the interesting things that was discussed was the WUI, and so wildland urban interface information, and and about the community risk reduction with regard to the 5 E's: engineering, emergency response, economic incentives, education and enforcement around trying to make our homes safer when we live in a wildland interface. Interestingly enough, the National Research Council of Canada is creating a national guide for WUI fire. So that we may be seeing in the very near future, because anything that is addressed in building or fire codes deals with the building itself, not with the surrounding area around it. So we'll be watching that to see how that impacts expectations, and that could have a very significant impact on our community in Nordegg, in Ferrier, much of Clearwater, I would say. So that'll be an interesting development as it comes forward, as well as watching the farm buildings piece that we're watching come forward. Other than that, business as usual. Councillor Swanson.
Quick question in regards to the senior housing. Has the vacancies gone up or gone down?
They're remaining steady at about 23 vacancies. We believe it's still this understanding or perhaps misunderstanding of folks feeling locked down in those facilities. I anticipate that as we get vaccinations and whatnot, that we'll see those easements come as COVID eases on us. Councillor Lang?
Yeah, just to clarify, it is, if I remember correctly, only the lodge with the vacancies, the independent housing units are all full.
Yes, and that's an important distinction, because all the other facilities are, as you said, they're rightful. As soon as an apartment or becomes available, they're being filled. I think that shows the difference on independent living, because those other ones are. So if there's no other questions, we see 6.6 with our councillor remuneration in the package. Then I'll be looking for a motion to accept reports as information. Councillor Duncan? Those in favor? That works. Perfect. So that brings us to 7.1, correspondence. Mr. Hagan, maybe you'd like to walk us through this?
Thank you, Reeve Laird. There's several items of correspondence here. I'm wondering if there's any specific items that council has questions on or would like to discuss.
Okay. Councillor Swanson.
As I mentioned before, the letter that we received from Century 21, item 7.2, was very interesting, and I was wondering if we should be adding that to the MDP review feedback.
That makes sense to me. I would definitely support that. The quickest way is thumbs up. Are we all in favor of that? That's 7 thumbs in the up direction. There we go. And we're not even hitchhiking. There we go. Any other concerns or comments with regard to the letters and correspondence? Councillor Duncan.
Just one question, and I'm maybe a bit out of the loop on this. How serious is the province about considering changing police forces? Are they just, they're doing a study basically and looking? There's been no official look for feedback from counties or other municipalities?
Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Reeve. Not that I'm aware of, we haven't received any specific requests yet. So I read these letters as somewhat preemptive in terms of concerns expressed over the ongoing study that the province is doing and taking an opportunity to share the concerns of specific communities with the province for consideration as they're going through their study.
Thank you.
Do you have a supplemental, Councillor Duncan? Councillor Lang?
I also find this letter from Century 21 very interesting. And I'm not sure, we have what, 3 or 4 different real estate agencies in Rocky? I would be curious if it'd be possible for the planning department to reach out to them and to get these other real estate agencies, their input as to what they're hearing when it comes to those looking to buy property in our county.
Does council agree with that philosophy to reach out to the other real estate agencies in the area? Deputy Reeve Vandermeer?
I just observe in the CAO's report that Mr. Pratt has already reached out to 3 real estate agencies, and the comment is summarized here, but I think it would be worthwhile to get documentation straight from those real estate companies as suggested here, as Century 21 submitted. I think to have an actual letter from each of them would be helpful in the discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Swanson, I saw your light on.
This just in regards to Councillor Duncan's ask in regards to feedback. I believe we did a feedback engagement session specifically for RMA back in, was it March or February? So that was the only feedback session that I remember in regards to the provincial policing.
My understanding from the provincial policing side of things is we're simply waiting on this report to be completed, and that was from that RMA discussion. The only other thing that I see is 7.7 is with regard to the municipal development plan from the Rocky Chamber, and perhaps that should also be included in the MDP information. It was mailed out after or separate. Okay. Councillor Lang?
So I just have a question. Do we need a motion to reach out to these other real estate agents?
I'm looking at Mr. Hagan.
No, Reeve, I will follow up with administration at our leadership team meeting tomorrow and ask them to do that.
Great, thank you. If there's no other questions with regard to the correspondence, we're looking for a motion to accept the correspondence as information. Councillor Lang beat you to it, Councillor Swanson. Those in favor? That is carried 7-0. That brings us to point 8. This might be a good point to consider stopping for a break, or do we want to talk about notices of motion? Point 8?
Let's keep going.
Keep going? Okay, so point 8, notices of motion. If we have any? Going once, going twice, 3 times? Okay, moving on to point 9. That then takes us to closed session. How about we take a 10-minute break before we go into closed session? We'll come back, we'll get a motion to go into closed session, but we'll take a 10-minute break. It seems like an appropriate spot. All right. It is 10:20. Everybody's had a chance to have a stretch and fill your coffee cups. We have a closed session as item number 9.1, and we're looking to go into closed session. Councillor Swanson, those in favor? That is carried 7-0 for All right. It is 11:04 and we're returning from closed session to open session. There are no motions to be made. As usual, I have a couple closing remarks. Again, thanking our administration for your continued efforts and support. You can find today's council meeting highlights and video posted on our website. By way of reminder, our next regular council meeting is scheduled for June the 8th, 2021. As we start to enjoy spring, I'm reminded of the words of James Burr, who said, in prosperity, prepare for change. In adversity, hope for change. And perhaps with the current COVID situation and recognition of spring, we're seeing a little bit of both. We recognize that COVID-19 continues to challenge our community. Please take appropriate precautions and stay safe. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn this meeting. Deputy Reeve Vandermeer, those in favor? That is carried 7-0. Have a great afternoon, folks.